let's go into actually using the device. How would we turn around and actually implement an AI box? The first thing we're going to need to do is we have to bring in video streams. So how can we do that? How can we find cameras and bring them into the AI box? Well, the first way that makes it very convenient is the discovery tool. So basically, any OnViv camera, OnViv S or greater, as long as it's on the same physical network and part of the same IP scheme as the AI box. We can just come in here, click Discovery. It's going to go out and it's going to handshake with the network, looking for any OnViv devices on that network. Now, we've got quite a few here. So how can we bring them in? Well, let's just see. Let's bring in this camera right here. So that is a Pixel Pro camera. So that should be factory default admin 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just so you know, I'm not lying. I'm going to click on the little eye, and there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can make the old Spaceballs joke about having to change the combination on my luggage, but I don't know how many people remember that movie. Once you have the user ID and password, click login. Now we're going to have options here. And this goes back to what you've heard me say, honestly, repeatedly, to the point where I'm probably being annoying because I've said it so many times. But flexibility and intent of the device is what comes into play here. Not every deployment is going to require you to apply the analytics to the mainstream video stream coming off of the camera. So in this case, this is a 5 megapixel camera. Are the analytics that I'm going to apply going to have any benefit to them in terms of accuracy by running them on a higher resolution image? The answer is not always yes. The answer is not always no. Just know that the option is there, and this is something you have to consider when you are configuring and deploying the AI box. Now, in this case, I just want to do people detection. People detection isn't any better at a high resolution than it is at a low resolution because people are pretty well defined and the AI box is pretty well trained. So I could get away with just simply taking the stream, the secondary stream from the camera. Additional benefits of this are your video management software or your recording device, whether it be the DVR or it be the embedded NVR. They're usually set to record when an event happens at high resolution. So it's not really going to be an issue of me having to identify what has happened on screen because my recording device is getting it at that higher resolution, which will allow me, should an event happen, to identify what the cause of that event was. Do I need to worry about the high resolution versus low stream from that perspective? No. So impact on the AI box is, if I bring that high stream into the AI box, am I going to impact the quality of that recording? Depending on your network, depending on your camera, again, it may be a yes or a no answer. If I have an older camera and it doesn't really support multiple users, bear in mind, every time a video stream is being accessed from a camera, it's a user logging into that camera to pull that stream. If I have an older camera and it doesn't really like multiple users logged in at the same time, then the answer is going to be no, don't use the mainstream, use the substream, because the older camera recording device may get a less than high resolution image or a less than clear image. It may not even get the stream because with two devices pulling the stream at the same time, two users logging into the camera at the same time, if the camera can't support it, one of them is not going to get the best picture or any picture at all. Now, modern day cameras typically can handle 4 to 7 users pulling the mainstream and or pulling the substream at the same time. But now take into account what is the bandwidth impact of 2 video streams being pulled from that camera. So looking at it from that perspective, I have a camera. It is a 100 megabit pipeline coming off that camera. It is a 100 megabit pipeline going into my switch or into my router, depending on network configurations. If I pull one, let's just say 5 megapixel video stream, and it gives me, and it's a 10 megabit bandwidth requirement. Okay, that still leaves me 90 megabits worth of pipeline. To get technical, 100 megabits pipeline usually means you really only have about 60 to 66 megabytes of available usable bandwidth. So realistically, I've just gone from, let's just keep it easy, I've gone from 60 down to 50. So I have 50 megabits of bandwidth available. If I do the math, that means I can pull 5 more additional client access streams from that camera, giving me a total of 60 megabytes, 6 streams.
I got a question. So if when you press the discovery button and you see this device, that means the cameras are OnViv compatible, right?
At the very least, OnViv S compliant. Anything less than OnViv S, and you're not going to see it.
Okay. Because when we were trying to set up some sites, and we would get the cameras here, and we would input the username and password, and it would say authentication failed.
Not anything to do with the OnViv protocol. That's the wrong user and wrong password. Typically, the user ID and password that's being asked for here is the same user ID and password you would use to log into that camera, web interface login. If you have the correct user ID and the correct password, and you're still getting authentication denial, go into the camera, look to see what its overall login credential requirements are. There are certain cameras which have additional credential requirement on the OnViv driver level. That may either be under an actual indicator of OnViv or maybe under the indicator of RTSP stream. Basically, you're going into the realm of cybersecurity at that point, because this initial login right here, what it's doing is it's pulling the RTSP video stream from the camera. There may be additional authentication required to allow a device to pull that RTSP video stream from the camera. So that's what you're more than likely you're running into that, because I've run into that quite a few times. I've had that with Sony cameras, for argument's sake. A lot of Sony cameras require additional credentials on the RTSP video stream side. So if you go in, you may find that the RTSP authentication is set either to none, basic, digest, and newer ones have WF, every token, or terminology similar to that. You basically just have to find what is the correct combination of settings in the camera to allow that stream to be pulled. Sometimes it's setting the RTSP authentication to none or to basic.
I mean, we will input manually the RTSP URL, and that would work. Yep. I don't know why it wouldn't work on this screen, but
yeah, it just comes down to the way the handshake is happening. So, and again, it comes down to, so you understand the hows and the whys. The AI box is handshaking on an RTSP authentication level. It's being found over the OnViv protocol, but it's handshaking, communicating through the RTSP protocol. Camera side, depending on the authentication that's implemented, that handshake either happens or is denied. So in other words, it's allowed or not allowed. I haven't seen too many times. I mean, it's usually if you put it in manually like you see here, it would still require the authentication on the camera side to be properly configured. So if you manually put it in and it's still allowed you to handshake.
Yeah, so like I would press discovery, I would see the cameras, put in the username and password, it would say authentication failed. So I would go in and the other screen, put in the RTSP, put in the same username and password, IP, media profile for what the camera was using, and that would it would pull in the stream.
Yeah, that's, to me, it's kind of a conflicting expectation, because to me, if it didn't work the one way, it shouldn't be working even if you manually put it in. If it does, then it could come down to, like I said earlier, OnViv is implemented with 3 potential flags.
Yeah.
So it may be that on the AI box we've only got 1 flag implemented, but on the camera side it's a different flag. Now, I'm saying that from the point of perspective of assuming, without actually knowing. But one thing I would ask is, when you come across that situation again, take a screenshot where you're at in the AI box, like we are right here. Email Ganz support with what the camera make and model is, what firmware is on that camera, if you know it, and a brief description of the RTSP communications issue that you ran into, where when discovered by the AI box, the user ID and password didn't work, but when you manually put it in, it did work. Because then we can take that and we can send that to our engineering team, and they can begin to troubleshoot, figure out what's going on. All right, so you understand conceptually the concerns of bandwidth when configuring this stuff from the camera side. Let's go ahead, we're gonna pick one of these, and I think I have channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, 6 is available, so we'll just go ahead and bring in this to channel 6. So you may discover more than 16 cameras. This is, the AI box itself is a 16 channel, and that basically means I can only bring in 16 potential video streams. So something to bear in mind. There's a 4-channel version of the box and there's an 8-channel version of the box. So always bear in mind what the limitations of the box are. Apply. Okay, so now here's the camera. Now, as you already said and noted, we can manually come in if we know the RTSP syntax and manually type it in. And if we've typed in the user ID and password correctly, what we'll see over here would be a connection made and the stream pulled in. Now, I'm just going to put in 5MP. the camera is working off TCP, but again, doesn't necessarily have to be a camera. It may be an older one, or it might be a DVR that you're pulling in a video stream from, or it might be an embedded NVR you might be pulling a video stream in from. So again, options, UDP protocol and multicast protocol. So just be aware that they're there. I've got my camera video stream coming in. What can I do with it? So right here, AI algorithm, come down here, drop down box. One thing you're going to notice is you've got all these guys here are selectable. As we scroll down, we can see ones that are grayed out. So why would they be grayed out? They may be a trial like we see down here, or the resources available may not be high enough for that analytic to be utilized. So what do I mean by that? If we look up here, we can see this 16-channel box has a total AI algorithm units of 2,000. And every time I add an AI filter to the box, or to a channel, I should say, it uses up some of those available units. So those are the resources, those are the overhead. You can't quite see it over here, only because my screen's a little crunched. But these are the resources being utilized by the bandwidth, which you can see down here as it changes. Again, this also kind of lets you see, these are two areas that allow you to make sure that what you're doing is supported by the hardware's available resources. So if something is not working here, it's grayed out, it's red, it's something's there to say, hey, we got an issue, look up here and you get a pretty good idea. So if I brought in a whole bunch of, say, 1080p or 5 megapixel, 4K, whatever that video stream might be, I might be pushing the resources too high. In which case, I got good visualization to let me know I need to readjust my configuration to make this work. When you think of AI algorithms, or I call it AI units, basically as a measure of resources that are going to be utilized. Every analytic, every AI application in the AI box requires resources. Again, bearing in mind that the nature of the box is an embedded device, it has its limitations, and understanding what those limitations are and then being able to work with those limitations allow you to get the most out of the box. So in this case, I'm already using 975 AI units. These are the functions that they say are available to me. Let's say for this camera, I want to select human detection. And in this case, human detection, normal speed, normal attributes being the expectation, but potentially the people may be moving rather quickly as opposed to, they may be running, for argument's sake, or power walking very fast. This kind of gives me the greatest flexibility in terms of human movement. That's if I'm expecting the area that I'm watching with the camera is a fairly closed-in area. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a parking lot, in which case now I'm looking at for like human far away. Or I may just apply for human and vehicle. I want to know for either or. So let's say human and vehicle, and we can see my available resources have jumped in terms of what's being utilized. So let me scroll down and we'll click the apply button. I'm going to drag that over so we can actually see those other resources. We can see that disconnect, then connected, and then showing what the resolution that I'm at, what my video resources are. So in other words, 32.6 images per second roughly. Gives us a good idea what the cameras are basically set to and what's being pulled in from the camera. And again, the overall AI box supports a maximum of 1,000 frames per second or images per second, depending on your preference. And I can see right now about 311, roughly 310 images per second is what's going to be going through this box. I can see the AI algorithm or the AI units. My resources are 1,455 being utilized out of 2,000. So if you were looking at this like on a gauge, I mean, we're probably looking at about 75% resource utilization on the AI. Not bad at all. Still room for additional stuff to be added. But again, it depends on what analytic I add. So bear in mind, different analytics will utilize a different amount of the required resources. Okay, so we've got our camera. We know our resources are still balanced, so we are all good on that.